Iowa State so badly wanted some kind of reaction. I mean, they wanted to antagonize something, and Jerome Tang gave them nothing.
No, he gave them nothing. He heaped a bunch of respect on him. And when I asked that question, I did like, though, like at the beginning too, he's like, we don't expect anyone to like us. So that's a good way to put it too. But what I will say is, like, that post-game celebration in the locker room, it looked like it was a little bit more gratifying.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello and welcome into another edition of Three Ma. I'm John Kurtz, joined by Derek Young and Cole Manbeck on a glorious day. Today, K-State wins 80-61 inside Hilton Coliseum. Yes, you heard me correctly. 80-61. A 19-point win over the Cyclones, who were all geared up, had been waiting for this day for a year to welcome Jerome Tang back into their building. Their sports information department was having to warn K-State media and K-State families and donors who were attending about what they were about to walk into. And instead, Jerome Tang just very nicely shut them all the hell up. And that calls for a toast from our friends at Holiday Distillery. Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon, 360 Vodka. Hell, after a day like that, just mix them together. I don't care what you do. But I'm sure there were lots of K-State fans out there who were partaking and celebrating based on that. And to any Iowa State listeners, I'm sure it's been a rough couple of days here. If you want to make yourself feel a little bit better, just go find some Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon and start drinking now. It will, by the end of the podcast, you'll probably be feeling much, much better. DY was there. DY was in Ames for the game at Hilton Coliseum. Man, watching Iowa State's 29-game home winning streak go down in flames had to be incredible. I set this up on the Patreon pod, which Cole and I did a lot of talking about this last night too. If you want more, patreon.com/3ma. But I set this up, DY, as like, imagine this. Like, these people had no doubt in their mind that they were winning. Like, there was no fear going into yesterday because K-State is what they are this year. They think that they broke Jerome Tang last year. They have not lost in 29 straight home games. Even with the injury that they're dealing with now, they beat KU by 17 at home. Even their most nonpartisan media is getting in with mocking columns about Jerome Tang. Like, everybody, their entire environment is just like, oh, this is going to be great. We'll get to laugh at Jerome Tang again. And they not only get beats, but they get beat by 19. K-State out-toughs them, out-physicals them, beats them at their own game, essentially. So what was the mood like inside good old Hilton Coliseum?
Well, it was a little bit more calm before the game than I was anticipating. Like, I thought it would be like, some of those K-State games where they welcome into KU, where the students are basically standing for an hour even before the game and throughout the game, like, never sit back down. But like the students were kind of like just chilling until it got a little bit closer to tip. And then it really started, like, every coach had walked out, all the players had came out for the starting lineups. And then the last person to come out was Jerome Tang. And you could tell that the entire arena was like waiting for him to just walk out of that tunnel. And as soon as he did, they just erupted in what I would describe as probably the most fiercest and loudest and longest chorus of boos I've ever seen for an opposing head coach at a particular venue. I don't know that I've ever ran into anything of that nature before. And then even louder was when it was kind of weird. TJ Otzelberger came out afterwards, well after everyone else, and they did this like introduction, like he was coming out of the tunnel. Like, it was kind of weird. Like, they really built it up, and of course that was even louder. So before the game, that was probably the moment. And then obviously they jumped out of the gates 13-4, and that place was going pretty bonkers. The first time out, I had tweeted about it, but like every student had their phones out just pretending to be filming the huddle, which I thought was, pretty good of them. But like, I will say I was a little disappointed because they didn't keep that up. It's like they got bored. Like, they didn't do that for any other timeout. They didn't do it for the full timeout. They kind of got bored with it at one point. there were plenty of times throughout the game where you come back from a media timeout, a commercial break, whatever it may be, and like in between they're sitting down, and then they don't get to everyone to stand up until the action's like 5 or 6 seconds in. So I don't know. I guess I was anticipating, and some of it I get was because it wasn't going the way that they had hoped. But even before it was like a 15, 20 point lead, I just felt like I was going to see a little bit more vigor. And I thought Hilton Coliseum kind of wasn't as fiery as I anticipated, even when the game wasn't out of hand. So that would be actually my takeaway, is that we didn't get everything that we thought we were going to. Now, once it became a 15-point lead, I think they lost a little bit of interest. And then, of course, they brought it back down to 6 at one point in the second half, so it started to heat back up then at that point. But then Kansas State went on another run. So I think the play of Kansas State really limited what the crowd could do. But even before that, I thought they left a little bit to be desired in terms of what I was anticipating.
DY, how was the drive getting out of Ames? I know that there was a lot of flooding going on from all the cyclone tiers. Did you have any issues with hydroplaning to get out of there? You know they have flood issues, and then you couple that with all the tears coming down the Iowa State fans' faces. There had to be issues getting out of there. You must have good tires to have made it home already.
I do have good tires, but I'll brag about that. I do have good tires, but no problems there. A couple last things I guess I didn't say yet because I had it written down. The most enjoyable part was probably the crowd. Couldn't wait to leave at about the 2-minute mark. They were just like in waves getting the heck out of there. So I'm sure from a Kansas State perspective, in terms of the team, getting to see that was pretty gratifying. And I will say, it really, like, when you go to most places, they'll boo a lot of calls, but not everyone will boo every call. And Iowa State fans, it is true what they say. They will literally boo every call. Like, there was a couple times where a guy would just like plainly foul someone, or they literally would step out of bounds with the ball. Like, there's nothing to be argued, and they will boo the crap out of it still.
Well, and one team was in hellacious foul trouble the entire game, and it was not the home team. Fouls in the first half, I know it was like +5, I think, for K-State, but like, Doug's in foul trouble. Max Jones is in foul trouble. Like, what do you want?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily the foul disparity or even the free throw disparity. It was where those fouls were being allocated that really put Kansas State behind the 8 ball there towards the end of the first half.
Yeah. Well, interesting, the report there. Part of it has to be DY that K-State just kind of shut them up. They never got a chance to really get it totally rolling after the first, which I'll be honest, I didn't even see the 13-4 run at the beginning of the game because they hadn't switched over yet, and I didn't realize that I could be watching that on ESPN News, so I didn't even get to see the bad part.
It was bizarre because they actually had 3 really good runs. Iowa State had a 13-4 run at the beginning of the game to take that lead, excuse me, but Kansas State erased it so quick. They went on a run of their own, and I think took a 17-16 lead. So that 13-4 became 17-16 K-State in a blink of an eye. And Iowa State, I believe, had 10-0 and 13-0 runs in the second half, but to no avail. I mean, there was one point too. I mean, Kansas State had a 30-6 run, right? They were up there. Iowa State was up 33-28. K-State turned that into a 58-39 lead. So they didn't have a lot to cheer from because they were playing from behind a lot in the second half, but they still had runs of 13-4, 13-0, and 10-0, and still somehow lost by 19.
DY, real quick, one last thing I'm curious on your perspective from being there. The thing that really struck me about this, and it's such a great sign, not only because of how you hold it in contrast with, how Iowa State was acting throughout the entirety of this game, but just for we've been talking about, at least I have, wanted to see some real humility out of Jerome Tang and the staff, given how things have gone this year, and they needed to display some of that. And even back to, we had discussions last year about like, hey, regardless of what you think about the accusations at Iowa State, wasn't really a smart PR move. And then people are ganging up on him and throwing stuff on him that isn't even fair, like the Bill Self handshake and stuff, but it just creates this reputation. He walked in there, and from the time that he stepped on the floor there, was just model citizen. Didn't seem to be blown up on the sideline at all. TJ Otzelberger is the one that just lost his shit 2 times. One positively, one negatively. Iowa State fans have the signs mocking him. They're doing the cell phone thing. Even had a couple of media members in Iowa insinuating that when he blew a kiss to like his wife and family behind the stands, that it was blowing a kiss to Jim Carrey, the Jim Carrey guy. Like, they're acting like that. Jerome Tang just stands there, coaches like normal, and then at the end of the game, he's standing at the tunnel. Mason did a great job of getting video of this. He's standing at the tunnel, high-fiving his guys and telling Coleman to like quiet down and don't do too much chirping on the way out because they got to see him again this year. Like, complete model citizen behavior from the staff, which it was perfect. You needed it.
That's hilarious that they tried to take the blowing the kiss thing into that's really a reach when he does that every single game because his wife is behind the bench. Yeah, that's stupid. And I thought someone needed to ask a question, and I was like, well, I'll be the one. I said, you walked in there as villain number 1, like, hands down. I said, does that make the win any more gratifying? I asked that question after the presser. He dodged it. I don't know that he wanted that question, but he probably was expecting it, but he dodged it and just basically heaped a bunch of respect on Iowa State fans for creating the atmosphere that they do on a regular basis.
Like really smart fans. I mean, that's the other thing. Like, Iowa State so badly wanted some kind of reaction, you know? I mean, they wanted to antagonize something, and Jerome Tang gave them nothing.
No, he gave them nothing. He heaped a bunch of respect on him, and when I asked that question, I did like, though, like, at the beginning, too, he's like, we don't expect anyone to like us. That's a good way to put it, too. But what I will say is, like, that post-game celebration in the locker room, it looked like it was a little bit more gratifying.
Yeah, well, you saw how Otzelberger reacted when they went on a 13-0 run. You think Otzelberger didn't want that one really bad? Yeah.
I think that's what makes it so special, DY, is that you see Otzelberger, not only he gets the tee purposely. I mean, I'm sure he was upset with the call too, but he's trying to motivate his team. And I mean, it's as demonstrative as I've ever seen him. You know, he's usually pretty laid back. Yeah, he's usually pretty laid back. And then they go on that 13-0 run, and during the midst of that, there's a timeout called by K-State to try and slow it. And Otzelberg comes out on the court, and he is losing his mind out of excitement, pounding his guys on the chest, just pumping his fist. And you don't usually see him like that. You knew he wanted this game really bad, just like their fan base did. And obviously, we know Jerome Tang wanted this game really bad, not only to end the 15-game losing streak on the road, but to beat a top-5 team on the road that has the nation's second longest winning streak. And you see that post-game reaction in the locker room with these guys. It was so fun and cool to see that, to see these guys start to have some of that joy and happiness and momentum building and sustainability of a 3-game winning streak in Big 12 play. Yeah, it was pretty special, really cool. You could tell how much this one meant to him. And I think that's just what makes it all the more impressive, guys, is that they went in there to a place that wanted this game so incredibly badly. And they're 15-point underdogs, 14.5-point underdogs. I think Kellis had a tweet earlier today that he can't find K-State with a larger point spread outright victory in the last couple of decades as a result of that. And so one of the biggest upsets that you will see, K-State goes in there and just dominates them. And John, you mentioned it earlier, but in their Big 12 wins, Iowa State, obviously they won 29 in a row, but in their 4 Big 12 wins this year at home, they've won by 17, 19, 23, and 25. And K-State goes in there and wins by 19. And the converging factor of the team with the 15-game road losing streak that hasn't won one since the season opener of Big 12 play at West Virginia last season to an Iowa State team that hadn't lost at home since February of 2023, nearly 24 months ago. To have K-State to win that game, not only win it, but to win it by 19 is really just remarkable.
And if we're in the business of really twisting the knife on Iowa State, the women beat Iowa State a few nights before that in overtime. So that's 2 straight wins over the Cyclones.
All right. Hey, good job, DY. Good job. Okay, so I mean, there's so much. We did more talking on the Patreon podcast last night about like more big picture kind of things, like the psyche of both sides going into this game. We didn't get into as much of like the nuts and bolts of the actual game, which is, you know, probably more reserved for this type of space. But I mean, it is unbelievable to me, DY, how much tougher this team has become in 3 weeks. I was shocked. I was like, Cole, when was the Houston game? Was that like a month ago? Like, no, that was 3 Saturdays ago. 3 Saturdays ago, they played Houston and lost by 30. And we had the Jeff Goodman interaction with the Houston fan that was like, we've blown a lot of people out this year, but I've never seen anybody kind of lay down with that type of weird attitude. They have come so far from that. I mean, Doug, then after that, it was the next Tuesday, right? It was the Tech game when it almost seemed like they lost the game on purpose to prove a point to Doug. And now Doug looks like, a second team all Big 12 point guard right now, like the way that he's playing with a lot of toughness and energy on defense. And it's incredible the way that they have been able to channel some actual toughness and defensive intensity when Cole said they were trending toward being the worst Ken Palm era defensive team that K-State has had. And they did that against Iowa State in their gym, a team that we're looking at the Iowa State-Texas Tech game not long ago and being like, God, why can't we have a team that's like as tough as those guys? And they beat the hell out of them in their own gym doing it that way. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, Doug McDaniel all of a sudden looks like a model citizen. So something there definitely flipped, because that's kind of what a lot of us, not just me, a lot of us have said throughout the season. It's like, you're not going to get the Kansas State team you wanted or were anticipating until Doug McDaniel gets it. And I don't know what happened for him to get it, but he gets it now. And there was, I don't know, there was up until this point, I've been wondering when that's going to like fade away, or where he's just going to revert back to himself, because it's been more inconsistency than anything as well. I mean, knock on wood, it kind of feels like it's here to stay. And I'd be curious at what point, or what was it? What was the sign? What was the interaction? What was the conversation? What was the lesson that hit home the hardest that kind of turned the tide in this way? I'd be very, very curious. It's kind of been what I've been writing about in a roundabout way in the last few weeks. This is kind of the product of a lack of roster continuity, where the staff doesn't understand the players and the players don't understand the coaches until a certain point where it clicks. Sometimes it's going to click in time. Sometimes it won't. This is probably one of those cases where maybe it won't, but it has clicked now. So it'll be interesting if that changes how things happen with the NCAA tournament moving forward. We're not used to seeing teams come from such a low point to doing stuff postseason wise. I'm not to say that this Kansas State team will, but like college sports is so different now, where you can have a team look like really bad in the first half of the year, but then actually reach their upside, which is still pretty high in the second half of the year. And what that means, because the sport's just totally different now with the waves that happen. So it is what you alluded to, John, but I think it's just the coaching staff and not all of the roster, but most of the roster finally understanding each other, I believe.
Yeah, you mentioned Doug, UI, so let me just give the numbers on him real quick. Last 4 games for Doug McDaniel, he's averaging 14.3 points, 19 assists, 12 turnovers. He had the 5 turnovers yesterday and 5 assists.
That's going to happen with Iowa State.
Exactly. I'm not holding anything against Doug for being a 1-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio against an Iowa State team that forces top 15 in the country year in and year out with Otzelberger in terms of turnover rate. He's 8-19 from 3 over his last 4 games, 42%. Recall, he was a guy shooting in the 20s. %wise from 3 most of this season, and was a guy in his first 2 years of college basketball that was at 36.3% from 3, just hadn't been able to get it going. The season high ties a season high for 3 3-point makes in a game. He had a 106.3 offensive rating versus Iowa State. It is his 3rd straight game he's had an offensive rating over 100. Okay, that is a big deal, because in his previous 10 games before this stretch, which goes back to the St. John's game, his offensive rating was an average of 77.7. His O rating in his last 3 games is 106.3. It is a huge jump for Doug McDaniel. His 20 points against Iowa State, a season high. He's played over 30 minutes in 5 straight games. His last 3 games, he has an assist rate of 35%, all over 30% in those 3 games. The prior 10 games before that, his assist percentage was 17%. It is more than doubled. He has a steal rate of 3.3. That ranks 15th highest in the Big 12, and that is on the season. Doug McDaniel has bought in. And I think my favorite moment from the game yesterday, DY, I don't know, I'm sure you saw this. When Jerome Tang called him over when the game was in hand, there were 35 seconds left. Doug had just made a couple big baskets to just finish out the game. And there was a foul called on Iowa State. And Doug goes over to Jerome Tang, and Jerome Tang embraces him, gives him a hug. That just shows to me that those two are connected and aligned, and they have figured things out collectively together and went through the hard times. And I think this thing is trending in a very positive direction. And we have talked about it for the last couple of weeks, the percentages on Doug McDaniel returning, continuing to increase, and the impact that could have. And that's what you're seeing right now. You talked about it on the last KCSN show that you and John did. The way Jerome Tang talks about Doug McDaniel is night and day different than what it was a few weeks ago, even, where he wouldn't even really touch on him. He was frustrated with him. I listened to his coach's show this last week after the Oklahoma State game too, DY, and he was raving about Doug. It's clear that those two have kind of found a path forward, it looks like, and Doug's play has significantly improved. I just love the body language. I love the way he's playing on the defensive side of the floor. Maybe my favorite play from him yesterday was when he jumped that pass coming over the top on a screen and stole it. And that's a guy paying attention. He's paying attention to the scouting report. He's reading what they're doing, and he gets the steal, and he goes down and finishes. I just really blown away by what Doug McDaniel. This is the guy we thought K-State was getting, and now it looks like the chemistry is there, and these guys as a team collectively are coming together.
Yeah. I mean, Doug is the key to it all. I don't know how many times we've said that this year, that this team is basically going to go as far as Doug McDaniel will take them. Like, he was the first guy that they identified and nailed in the transfer portal and built around him, and that was going to be the key to everything. Now, there are still, tons of other guys to really celebrate here in the effort that they put forth in the game, and we will definitely do that. But the biggest story is the fact that Derek Young is actually wearing a K-State home field shirt today. It's nobody else. Nobody else gets the spotlight. Not like Arkansas. I thought maybe you'd come in with like some Arkansas stuff, for what they did last night. But you're rocking the Cats. I appreciate that, Ty.
I got this thing, but guess what?
Why do you own that thing? Why do you own that?
So he can do that.
So I can
right
do
there.
that. That's worth the
Hilton Magic, my ass.
That's the eraser.
Podcast listeners, DY had a Hilton Magic hat that he just threw away from Home Field Apparel, though, at homefieldapparel.com. If you'd like to go get one of those. So I guess if you want to throw things, you can buy Iowa State or Kansas gear at homefieldapparel.com and even get 15% off your first order using promo code 3MOD24. Or you can just buy the pullover like K-State hat, or like Cole has, or the K-State hat that he has. You can do all of that at homefieldapparel.com. Remember, use promo code 3MOD24 for 15% off your first order, and we are back in just a moment.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
I'm going to once again apologize. I did this on the Patreon pod that we did last night. I can't remember who it was specifically in the Discord that first said this, but I said it to Cole yesterday. We'll see what DY thinks of this. Max Jones playing some really good ball right now. Somebody said he was bringing like some Desi Sills energy to the team right now. And I was like, I think that's a pretty good comp. Obviously, they're wildly different in terms of athleticism, and he's a much better shooter. He does it in a different way. But you're kind of getting like that sort of contribution and that sort of energy, I feel like, right now from Max Jones, which has been immensely helpful to this team to help out your big two, which, again, they're not Marquise Noel and Keontae, but your big two would be Doug McDaniel and Coleman Hawkins. Max Jones has been a huge, huge key to what's happening right now.
He's a huge key. I have a hard time comparing the two just because they're so different on the court, I guess. But I guess in terms of what the element that they technically bring, I guess that one's a hard one for me. Love both.
Glue guy, third wheel.
Man, I don't know if I even want to consider Desi a glue guy that year. He was just so explosive. Like, he was more than a glue guy. Max Jones is kind of a glue guy because he does.
I don't know. I'd argue Max Jones right now is a little more than a glue guy. He's averaging 14 a game the last 6 games.
Yeah, I guess like the why I would consider him the glue guy is like he makes the tough baskets at the right times. He plays excellent defense, a great rebounder when you need it. Good defense. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the comparison. I feel like I could find a better one, but it would take me time.
See, I actually really like the comparison, DY. I mean, I think the stats numbers probably, well, they aren't really equal because Max Jones is shooting over 40% from 3 now in the season. We know Desi struggled from beyond the arc during his time. But as far as like thinking about their roles within the team and kind of being that third piece, fourth piece, and how critical they were, look, Desi was a tremendous defender. Max plays his ass off defensively. He's not as athletic as John mentioned, but in his last 8 games, he's been in double figures in 7 of the 8. And the one thing that, when you think about the effort that Max gives, he's got 7 or more rebounds in 3 of those 8 games. And he's a guard. He gets after it. He gets in there. He's not afraid. And that's where I would say maybe similar to Desi. Like Desi was not afraid. He was relentless. He was tenacious. And Max Jones does everything just like that, just not at the same level of athleticism, but, equally important to this team and how valuable he's been.
Cole, I've got the stats. It's actually pretty incredible how this is way more similar than I would have even thought, their stat line. So Max Jones, 9.6 points per game. Desi Sills, 8.7. Rebounds, Max Jones, 3.9. Desi Sills, 3.5. Assists, Max Jones, 2.1. Desi Sills, 2.2. Desi Sills played 29.5 minutes a game. Max Jones right now is at 28.5. So, like, literally almost the exact same stat line. Now, again, I understand wrapping your head around, like, Desi Sills is this, like, freakish athlete, and Max Jones is the D2 guy who worked his way up and is very much not that athlete, and that's why he started where he did. But just in terms of their contribution to the team right now, I can't say enough good things about Max Jones. They really need it. CJ Jones struggling right now. They will probably need better moments from him at some point later on this season if they're going to keep this going. But right now, Max is that guy. So shout out to Max.
Yeah, it was really good. The thing that's a little bit funny in a way is like I can make an argument that it was probably their best game as a collective unit this year, but they really only got like really good games from like 4 players, it felt like, because like you didn't really get anything from your bench outside of like a couple timely gritty plays from Obi Kegaruka. Ugonna Onyenso didn't really do anything when he was on the court that was very impactful. CJ Jones fouled out and didn't have his best moments. David Castillo was certainly the moment was a little bit too big for him, and Jerome Tang quickly understood that and made the change that he did. And then David Gasson, as one of the starters, that was far from his best performance. So as a collective unit, hard to say it wasn't their best game of the year after beating Iowa State on the road by 19. But when I look back and kind of reflect on individual performances, and it really only felt like 4 guys were really good, right? Doug McDaniel, Max Jones, Coleman Hawkins, and of course Brendan Ozen, who knocks down a lot of his shots, 2 for 5 for the 3-point line, 9 out of 9 from the free throw line, which is huge. Made some very timely and clutch free throws. Was his best version of himself on the defensive end, and he blunted himself probably 3 different Iowa State runs, one with a 3-pointer that was timely. He also had a 3-pointer that extended a Kansas State run. I think gave them their biggest lead of the night, 58-39. He had the steal after Doug Medina slipped and turned it over. That would have, I think, made it a 4-point game, if I remember correctly, if they score off of that turnover, because I think they had already whittled it down to 6 at that point. So Brendan Hazen, in terms of just timeliness, impact, and the magnitude of his plays, that was certainly his best game of the season. Maybe you can find games with better numbers, but like the magnitude of his plays, I think that puts this one over the top. We've already talked about Doug McDaniel. Coleman Hawkins lives for these kinds of games, and without him having the start that he did, Kansas State probably gets run out of the building and doesn't have a chance to make the comebacks and runs that they did, because the reason why they turned a 13-4 lead into a 17-16 or 13-4 deficit and turned into a 17-16 lead was Coleman Hawkins. The way he was playing on defense, grabbing rebounds, he scored the first 7 points for K-State. So he was instrumental, especially at the beginning of the game, that really kept that thing within striking distance for K-State.
Since we're talking about individual guys here, we'll get into more of the crux of the overall game as well as we go through this show. There's so many storylines from him, but DY, you bring up Brendan Haasen. He goes 9-9 at the foul line yesterday. He's now attempted 49 free throws on the season. He's made 40 of them. He attempted 42 free throws in his first 2 years of college basketball. He's got 49 this year, and he knocked them down.
He gets fouled from the three-point line every game.
Yeah. And, so here's the thing with Brendan Haasen that's so impressive. First of all, last 4 games, he's 13 or 26 from 3, averaging just under 13 points per game during that stretch. He's shooting over 41% from 3 this season. His offensive rating on the year is over 123. It's the second highest on the team. That's a really good number. That mark ranks 13th among all Big 12 players with a usage rate of 15 or higher. Also important to note, David Gasson leads the team in offensive rating at over 127. That's 8th in the Big 12. He has the 10th highest three-point percentage in college basketball among guys who have attempted 153 or some more. Now, there's not a ton of them. There's 63 guys that have done that. He's 10th out of them. So he's really playing well right now. Again, a 123 offensive rating is sensational. He's averaging over 12 points per game this year. He is a guy that you want back next year. And the other thing I would say, John and I were talking about on the Patreon show last night, like, he played his ass off defensively. He gave every ounce of effort on that end of the floor. Jerome Tang has talked about him needing to be a guy that they can leave out on the court and not be a liability on the defensive end. He takes a charge yesterday. He made critical plays on the defensive end of the floor. There were various points he's guarding Taman Lipsey, Iowa State's point guard. He played so incredibly hard, and just a huge shout out to Brendan Haasen for how he did out there.
He got a steal from behind too. There were DY made the point that steal that he had when Iowa State was kind of surging back was really, really big. But there was another play where one of their bigs was like backing down, not paying attention, and he just rolled around from the side, took it away from him. Like,
K-State's done that a lot last few games too.
But just like Brendan Haasen, I mean, that is not the guy that I expected to be doing that, and he has struggled immensely at times defensively being out there. And if he can get, I mean, Cole, you pointing out that offensive rating is so key here because, guy, if he can get to the point where he is just even like, slightly like marginally below average defender, you can leave him out on the court so much longer, and he becomes such an effective player because of how well he's shooting the ball, man. That is such an encouraging sign to see out of him.
The detailed defensive scouting reports, it just seems like the hands are a lot more active now. I think that's the detail in the scouting reports by the coaches. I think it's the attention to detail and the buy-in on the scouting report from the players. But like, it just feels like lately, and I don't know if the numbers would necessarily reflect that, but they're just getting their hands on a lot more balls, forcing a lot more turnovers, stuff like that, which is key for this team because they're not always productive or efficient throughout a full 40 minutes in a half court. So if you can get out, force some turnovers, get some easy baskets, that alleviates the pressure to be as good in the half court.
Yeah. One thing I did notice, DY, in the Oklahoma State game, and some people on our Discord were talking about it too, like Doug had started to be kind of a rover defensively. Remember how Marquise would leave his man and then sneak up behind a guy and just go and poke the ball out? Doug did that multiple times against Oklahoma State. John, you just mentioned Brendan Haasen doing it. Like, I actually like that role for Doug. He's a guy that has a high steal rate during his college basketball career. I like having him sneak around with his quickness and try to get some steals and force some turnovers. K-State forced Iowa State into its highest turnover percentage on the season yesterday at nearly 26% on the overall game. The highest turnover rate Iowa State had in a game this year was 22.8% versus Arizona. Iowa State is not a team that turns the ball over. They were top 40 in the country with a turnover rate of 15%. And K-State forces them into a nearly 26% turnover rate, ties a season high for Iowa State with 18 turnovers as well. You just don't see that. And K-State now in the last 2 games has forced 2 of their 3 highest turnover percentages on the entire season. They were not doing a good job of forcing turnovers. They're doing it now. I've got a lot more numbers on just how good the defense has become over the last few games, and we can highlight that. But just wanted to note that. And I would say just on Brendan Haasen, still on the topic of him, like you guys mentioned some of his big moments. Other end of the floor offensively, that 3 he hit to end the 13-0 run was huge. When they cut it to 58-52, good look, good pass. What I loved about it is he caught it right in his shooting pocket, didn't even run it down, and just put it up. K-State answered back then with a nice run to push it back out to 14-point lead at that point. That three was gigantic. Everybody will remember the logo three from 28, 29 feet out. That was just amazing. But that three there, that was the biggest moment for me in the game to have that answer.
It's two more things I would kind of want to highlight, I guess, and then maybe we haven't yet. One being Coleman Hawkins. I kind of got into it a little bit in my last spiel. We probably haven't talked about him enough just because he kind of is, mundane. Coleman Hawkins, his stat lines typically are pretty much the same, but a game after he was only 5 of 10 from the free throw line, where I highlighted as being something that's kind of bothered him this year. I think he was below 60% free throw shooter headed into the Iowa State game. 4 of 4 from the free throw line, 3 of 3 from the 3-point line. So if he was at the charity stripe or beyond the arc, he was making it 7 out of 7 combined for those two. So really good game from him. These are kind of the moments that he relishes. I remember at one point in the second half as well. It was a surprise to me that it was this wide of a margin, but not necessarily surprising because you could tell that Kansas State was getting most of the loose balls and being that tougher team, and wasn't allowing really Iowa State to crash the glass until a little bit later in the game. I looked up at one point in the second half, and Kansas State was dominating Iowa State in second chance points 19-2 at one point, which that just doesn't happen to a Cyclone team where they get out-toughed, especially in their own building. It finished 21-6. Because Iowa State, I think, had something like 8 offensive rebounds in a span of like 2 minutes. Outside of that, they got nothing really going for. So they just dominated the Cyclones in second chance points, which is huge because that was, especially early in the season, an area where Kansas State was the one getting dominated.
Yeah, we got numbers on that too that we can hit on. You mentioned Hawkins. I'll just put a bow on the individual player discussion from the game. But Coleman Hawkins now, guys, has 7 or more rebounds in 5 straight games. He has 30 assists in his last 5 games, so 6 per game. Those last 5 games, 6 assists per game, 7.8 rebounds, 13.2 points. He had nearly 160 offensive rating versus Iowa State. His offensive rating over his last 5 games is nearly 127. His 24.7 assist rate this season is a career best for Hawkins. It ranks 6th nationally among stretch 4s, classified by Bart Torvik, and it is 2nd among Power 6 players behind only Cooper Flagg. His assist rate among all Big 12 players ranks 13th in the league overall, and his defensive rebounding rate ranks top 20 in the Big 12 overall. Coleman Hawkins doing exactly what we thought. Not only that, he steals the ball at a very high rate when he reaches in and swipes down. He's doing exactly...
The Coleman pawing at the ball thing is awesome.
He saved the Wildcats at the end of the first half because they had no... It was clear that David Castillo, this wasn't going to be his moment. C.J. Jones wasn't playing his best ball. Dug McDaniel has 3 fouls. C.J. Jones has 3 fouls. Iowa State's ball pressuring basically full court there at the end of the break, right before the break, because they realized the pickle that K-State is in. And what happens? Coleman Hawkins basically turns into your point guard and kind of saves that game there before, and not letting it get out of hand, but also still maintaining a 2-point lead going into the break. So I thought maybe his most impactful moment, at least for the team and what they needed at a specific time, was probably in knocking down one of the threes was pretty timely. I think he had a couple of free throws that were pretty timely, but just in general, his ball handling at the end of the first half was something they absolutely had to have.
Well, to me, the biggest storyline from all of this, you take it a little bit more globally, and of course, it's brought to you by our friends at Alenco, ALENCO home.com. If you have any home improvement needs, they have the hookup for you. But I would say, on a more big picture standpoint here, it's the fact that we're talking about all these stats about defense and toughness and keeping things together. And I think Coleman Hawkins deserves a ton of credit for this, being a guy who gave them professional efforts even when things were not going very well. For the most part, there was a moment here or there where, like the Houston game we pointed out, looked like he could have given more effort for a loose ball, something like that. But for the most part, he was giving you professional efforts. And, people have said a lot of crazy, wild, heinous things about this team. Coleman's taking a lot of crap. Man, first of all, if he keeps this, if he's the reason that this season didn't totally go in the tubes when it absolutely could have, he's worth the $2 million, whether they get to the tournament or not, just for not sinking you for multiple years here. But Jerome Tang and this staff, man, they took so much crap from people. So much crap. So much wild stuff said behind burners online. And yeah, I'm not saying this season isn't still disappointing. And if they don't rally to make the tournament, which is still a long shot, then it's going to be ultimately very much a disappointment. Totally get it. But people calling him a con man and that he needs to lose his job, like keeping a team that was 7-11 together in the NIL era, when it's just hired guns, they're collecting checks, they could very easily just cash it in, go through the motions, collect checks, and be out of there with their money. Keeping that together, I'm sorry, you're not a con man and you're not a terrible coach that deserves to lose his job if you successfully do that. That is not, look at Bill Self right now, man. I mean, Kansas fans are, I get it, everyone's crazy. They're doing the same thing, calling for Bill Self to be fired, right? But like, it is hard navigating this era. And things went horribly wrong at the beginning of the year, but I am humbly asking you to keep the same energy about what is happening right now and just appreciate what's going on with them being able to keep this thing on the rails and produce one of the biggest wins, one of the best wins that K-State has had in this whole resurgence era of K-State basketball. Like it's very annoying how people got, like, you can be critical, but like, don't be wild and reckless and try and have some respect. And I think we're seeing now why it was the smart move to stay with having some respect for Tang and the staff and what they can do.
Yeah, don't rush to conclusions. Have a little bit of patience. Realize that this could be a 2-year project rather than one. Everyone wants it to be one. Sometimes it can't be one. If it turns into 2, you kind of like where this thing is headed, assuming you get a lot of the retention that you would want. And it's not a bad coaching job now that they have found the right buttons to push. It is actually now I would argue, a pretty good coaching job in this vein, because and I've said it before, to get this kind of effort, performance, care factor, and playing your best ball at a time where I would have assessed it as being the most unlikely time to get it, shows you the kind of connection that's in that locker room that we ourselves and other people didn't give them credit for, because of we weren't seeing the things that we wanted or needed to see, but they were seeing it. And eventually that worm started to turn, beginning with the Texas Tech game, even if it wasn't resulting in absolute wins. So, and what this does is probably earns them a little bit more trust back to where it was probably going to be a good atmosphere no matter what, but now you got, after you play Arizona State on the road, and I'll look ahead so they don't have to, you have 2 home games where I would anticipate incredible atmospheres coming up now against Kansas and Arizona. And the way that you played in the last, 3 weeks or so has given you the right to get that kind of crowd back in Bramlage.
Yeah. And I would say this, DY, like people that were calling Jerome Tang, you know who you were. I mean, we saw it from the burner accounts, calling Jerome Tang a con artist, et cetera. It was ridiculous. I mean, Jerome Tang and this staff, they want to win. They care about Kansas State. They put a lot of time and energy into K-State. Just look how much time Jerome Tang spent just trying to kill the chant. Like, he invests in the students. He spends time with the students. He cares about this place. He wants to win. He's competitive as they come. And I would also say this, for people that don't think Jerome Tang could coach and thought this was a one-year wonder in the first year with Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson, Jerome Tang has now beaten 15 top 25 teams during his time at Kansas State in 2.5 seasons. 7 top 10 wins now. Bill Self at KU during that same time frame, 15 top 25 wins, 8 top 10 wins. Pretty much same as Jerome Tang. Baylor during that time frame, 12 top 25 wins, 3 in the top 10. Iowa State, 16 top 25 wins, 8 in the top 10. All right, I get at the end of the season, some of those top 10, top 25 wins, those teams didn't finish where they thought they were at the time K-State played them, but that's how this works. We got to look at the numbers at the time they did play them. Jerome Tang and what he has done against teams like that, you do not beat that many good teams. You do not go into Texas a couple of years ago when Baylor, back-to-back, 2 top 20 teams, and win on the road and to house Texas and score 116 points. You don't go to Iowa State and end a 29-game road losing streak. You don't beat Tom Izzo in the NCAA tournament and John Calipari in Kentucky. You don't beat those coaches and Scott Drew 3 times and T.J. Otzelberger 3 times and Bill Self twice. If you can't coach, okay? It was not a one-year wonder. He can coach. This staff can coach, all right? They had a rough patch here. They had some misevaluations. It took longer than they wanted, and they deserve to be criticized for the start of this season, but fair criticism, not over the top. Right? They know what they're doing. They made some mistakes, and now hopefully they can dig themselves out of that hole. If they can't, at least we are seeing some signs that track toward a better improvement into next season and some lessons learned and humility, as John said. I'm not excusing the start to the year and going 7-11 with all the money invested in this program and missing the NCAA tournament potentially if it heads that way. You cannot miss the NCAA tournament back-to-back seasons. That's disappointing, but you got to hope they can figure it out. And right now, I think the staff needs a lot of credit, guys, for holding this thing together in this era of the NIL and portal when guys could have just collected a check and said the season ends in 5-6 weeks. We're out. We're just going to collect our money and go. For them to bounce back and for them to continually say throughout over the last 6-7 games, right? Like even when they were losing, they were saying, we're close, guys. We're close. Coleman Hawkins was like, we're going to start to knock some people off. And their intuition was correct. They knew they were close. And now they're starting to believe. You win 3 in a row like this and you win at a place like Ames, the power of belief starts to hit you. And I talked about it on the Patreon show with John last night. There starts to be that glimmer of hope. There's a long road to go, but you go 2-0 this week and you start to think, why not us?
Well,
hot, etc.
Couple things real quick before we start going down that road. Cole, I'm surprised you didn't even go into your stat because you tweeted maybe the most insane K-State basketball stat I've ever seen. But Bart Torvik, one of the analytics sites out there, has a tool where you can choose within a certain time frame and see what they would rank teams within that time frame. K-State, remember, 7-11 K-State with the, according to the burners, the con artist coach that's just stealing money from the school. K-State over the last 3 games is the number 1 team in college basketball. Literally the number 1 team in college basketball. And keep in mind, they blew out a tournament team in West Virginia. They blew out a bad team in Oklahoma State. And then they blew out a great team, the number 3 team in the country, on their home floor. They're the number 1 team in college basketball over the past 3 games. The offense ranks 14th in the country. The defense is number 3 nationally. If you take it back the last 6 games, okay, John, 3-game sample size. The last 6 games, they're the number 10 team in the country nationally. So, again, you're not going to do that with a group that was 7-11 if you have no coaching chops. I'm sorry. And that's just not. And this is why, yes, there is tons of work to be done. It's a very steep uphill climb. There's virtually no margin for error. It's probably not going to happen. But the reason that you can start to think about that a little bit is because they have played not just good, not just squeaking by with some wins. They've been pummeling people. And that's what gives them an opportunity here. And the only reason that they started pummeling people and turned it from, hey, we're close, to, hey, we're actually winning games and killing people is because, and I want everybody to remember this moment when I asked this question on this podcast and I got a 1-word answer from Cole, which was no. It is because my guy Scott Drew came into the locker room after blowing the lead in Waco and gave them a rousing speech about the Baylor team that started 2-8 and made the Sweet 16. And I said, Cole, is that going to change the season? And Cole just said no. And Cole, now is your time to apologize to the great Scott Drew, architect of the greatest turnaround in college basketball history, national champion head coach. It is your chance to apologize to Scott Drew. So here it is.
I didn't think you were teeing it up for this, but I do owe Scott Drew an apology and Jerome Tang and the staff. I was incorrect in thinking that that would not help spur the turnaround, and clearly I was wrong. I would have appreciated Scott Drew more if he would have just went ahead and lost that game to Kansas State and Waco, and this would be a 4-game winning streak right now, and the resume would start to look a little bit better. But appreciate Scott Drew doing that and going into the locker room and making that comparison, and hopefully it comes to fruition and Kansas State gets into the NCAA tournament and gets on this heater and makes a run. That would be phenomenal. And gosh, I don't know what I would do. I already like Scott Drew.
I've got an idea. I've got an idea. Okay. If K-State makes the Sweet 16, like that Baylor team made the Sweet 16, will you donate $200 to Baylor's NIL fund?
Okay, that was what I was going to say, John. I will have to make it $300 to match. I texted you guys yesterday in Curry that before the game, that if K-State won at Ames, I would give $300 directly to Wildcat NIL as a result. And I'm on the hook for that now. And I said I was manifesting a win. You guys saw it. And I cannot go back on that because that could be bad karma. So I got to come through on that now for Wildcat NIL. If K-State makes a Sweet 16 this year, not only will I give $300 to Baylor's NIL collective, but I will price match that and give another $300 to Kansas State's NIL collective. So I'm in $900 at that point. All right. They make a Final Four. I will give $3,000 to K-State to Wildcat NIL. Okay. So Vanessa hopefully does not hear this episode and find out that I just blew the Disney World fund on NIL. But that is a Final Four, man, or a Sweet 16 with the way this season went. That's what I will commit to. Baylor NIL collective, you can hear this. You got me on the hook. If K-State makes a Sweet 16, Scott Drew, $300 coming to your collective as well. And I assume DY and John will also price match that. So we're going to go, $9,000 for a Final Four, 3 times 3,000, etc. Three Mall is going to sponsor a K-State player next year because we're going to be giving so much to K-State athletics.
Dude, those players are making more than that.
You guys better start signing up at patreon.com/3maw if we're going to be doing this. So please do that. Join our Patreon and Discord.
Yeah, I don't want to look like Will Ferrell right now in semi-pro when they hit the full court shot and the $10,000 check. Like, I need help, guys. So if you can come.
I love that movie. Led by as many as 26 against West Virginia, 32 against Oklahoma State, and 19 against Iowa State on more than one occasion. 58-39 after trailing 33-28, like I said earlier. And obviously the final score when they went by 80-61, 19 as well. So that was the largest lead against the Cyclones. And now you got to keep it up with, try to get back-to-back road wins. You got to go to Arizona State on Tuesday, who's coming off a pretty emotional finish against Arizona, in which their leading scorer, I believe his name's BJ Freeman, was ejected, as well as some other people as well. And he headbutted Caleb Love. So we'll see if any further punishment is coming his way. I guess it's not considered fighting because it was just a headbutt, but he headbutted Caleb Love. I can imagine that he's not the first person that's wanted to headbutt Caleb Love before, though.
Second time he's been ejected in 4 weeks from a game. So we'll see if Big 12 deems any action punishable by that and any sort of suspension. DUI, before we get in, I did have to amend. So, John, the numbers actually even changed slightly, even better for the 6-game stretch K-State's on since last night. So now over the last 6 games, K-State ranks as the number 8 team in college basketball over that stretch. And what makes that even more impressive, guys, is they did that 6-game stretch against opponents that rank as follows in the NCAA net rankings. Number 7, number 8, number 10, number 27, and number 46, West Virginia. So 3 top 10 teams in the net, number 27, Baylor, number 46, West Virginia, that they put this stretch together where it's 8th best in the country. A 6-game stretch is a pretty good sample size. And we'll see if they can build on that, but certainly encouraging. One thing I was going to mention, guys, well, more than one thing, bear with me for a couple minutes. Like, John, you mentioned this earlier. One of the things that was so impressive to me from the Iowa State game is just there is not maybe a more tougher team outside of Houston than Iowa State in college basketball in terms of physicality. And K-State went into Ames, and they were the more tough, more physical team. Iowa State shot 36.5% from the floor. That's a season worst for the Cyclones. It's not close. The next lowest percentage in a game was 41% versus KU this season. They went 32% from 2 in the game. A season worst. They went 11 of 34 from 2. It's the fewest 2-point makes they had this season. The lowest they had was 14 in a game. The lowest 2-point percentage coming into Saturday was 34.7% versus KU and Ames. So this was their season worst there. They came into the game 25th in the country, shooting 57% on twos. K-State holds them 27% below that mark, or 25% below that mark. Now in the last 4 games, K-State's holding teams to 57 of 142 from 2, under 36%. That is insane. K-State holds Iowa State to 0.87 points per possession, their second lowest points per possession game on the entirety of the season. They were top 15 in the country at over 1.2 points per possession. K-State was not only tougher on the inside, think about the rebounding. 44% offensive rebounding rate by K-State in the game. BYU mentioned it at 1.19-2 on second chance points. Otzelberger was furious about this in postgame. It's the highest offensive rebounding percentage allowed by Iowa State this season, who came into the game top 55 nationally, allowing an offensive rebounding rate under 27%. The 14 offensive rebounds by K-State, the most allowed by Iowa State in regulation of a game this season. And it's the highest offensive rebounding percentage by K-State in a game since the November 19th contest against Mississippi Valley State. K-State was tremendous defensively. They were really good on the offensive end as well, but specifically and on the inside. We already talked about the turnovers, etc. But I wanted to mention this stat on K-State's defense because we talked about it during the season that they were trending toward being the worst defense in the Ken Palm era for a K-State team. Okay, so from the Oklahoma State game in Stillwater through the game at Baylor, which is a 5-game stretch, K-State allowed approximately 1.20 points per possession. And if the season had ended at the time, it would have been the worst defensive rating by a K-State team in the Ken Palm era. In the last 3 games, K-State's opponents are averaging under 0.86 points per possession. West Virginia was at 0.91, Oklahoma State 0.79, and Iowa State is 0.87. And as a result, K-State's defensive rating has improved significantly. They're now under 1.01 points per possession, and they rank 69th nationally in defensive rating, according to KenPom. The last 2 games are the best defensive points per possession games allowed by K-State this season since the 4th game of the year against Mississippi Valley State. The defense is night and day different. The way that they're defending screens, they seem to have figured something out. It's not just an effort thing. Schematically, they seem night and day different, and it is very encouraging.
Yeah. Hard to disagree with all that. John is a big solid verbal fan. I think he got a few of us onto it. One of their terms is the letdown look-ahead sandwich. Well, that's exactly what this Arizona State game is on Tuesday, right after the emotional win over Iowa State, right before the big home game against KU.
I do feel like Cole brought up the Arizona game, or maybe it was UDY, that it helps a little bit that they're, because there's a lot. You guys think Jerome, you guys think Tang and Otzelberger don't get along? Like Bobby Hurley was like, his post-game press conference was wild, dude. Like,
tear it down. Yeah.
Well, first of all, he pulled the team off the floor so they didn't shake hands at the end of the game, and then he called Arizona classless in the post-game press conference, and then made a point. His parting shot, like his mic drop before he left the mic, was insinuating that he wouldn't vote Caleb Love all Big 12. So, that's a lot of distraction going on there for Arizona State. So I think that will help. But you are correct. Like, it's a road trip. It's a later game. It's just like a little bit out of the typical routine. And yeah, you're looking ahead to the Kansas game potentially on Saturday. And like we said, margin for error, if you're trying to do something special and miraculously get to the NCAA tournament, like there is not much margin for error left to be losing games like this one at Arizona State.
No, if you want any sort of postseason hope, you got to go win this one. It would be another quad 1 win, back-to-back quad 1 opportunities after beating Iowa State, because Arizona State's 58th in the net. Quad 1 is a top 75 road win in the net rankings, and so you got to go find a way to win it. It's not going to be a daunting atmosphere, especially on the heels of the Arizona game and them being upset there. I will say this. First of all, Arizona State doesn't play a lot of depth. They only play 7 guys. So let's see what happens with BJ Freeman, their leading scorer, because that could be impactful. They seem to think he'll play, but I don't know. I mean, a guy that's been ejected twice in 4 weeks seems like somebody should do something about that. But Arizona State also, guys, they lost at home to Baylor in overtime. They led Iowa State by 1 with less than 5 minutes, less than 5:50 left in the game last week And then they lost to UCF at home. But, like, they have been very competitive at home. They went on the road and won by 8 at West Virginia when momentum was high for the Mountaineers. And so they have some talented pieces, Sainon, Mason, Jihad, et cetera. Like, they've got some guys. But it's a game that you can win, and I think you need to win. If you look at the analytics now, what is so interesting about it is, according to Bart Torvik, K-State has a chance now. They have a 32% chance or higher to win in each of the 9 of their last 10 games, according to Bart Torvik, which is a far higher probability than it was before. 32% doesn't sound great, but that's a lot better than it was. They now have a 12.3% chance, according to Bart Torvik, of making the NCAA tournament. K-State's moved from 117th in the net rankings to 83rd in just the last 8 days. That is a 34-spot jump. They have jumped to 69th in KenPom when they were in the hundreds just 10, 12 days ago. And I would also, Bart Torvik's projections, the only game they have less than a 30% chance to win is at BYU, which is 18%. All the projected losses, according to Bart Torvik, are outside of BYU are by 5 points or less. So projects K-State to be in a lot of close games here and be competitive. So you got a chance to string some things together. And I'm not going to start talking NCAA tournament bubble or anything like that. You got to get about 500 before I start really entertaining that thought. But you go 2-0 this week, and then maybe that can be a discussion point.
Yeah, and just still even like looking ahead, like, man, you still got KU, Arizona, and Iowa State all coming to Bramlage, which, like, they should, assuming that they're just playing better with more energy still, like, those should be good atmospheres, environments. And like that's one of my favorite things about basketball season is just having the home environment and like really cool, fun home games. And you had virtually none of that up to this point based on how the season had gone. So
the West Virginia crowd was actually better than I anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, well, kudos to the crowd. Honestly, the Cincy one probably a little bit too, like just in terms of how they were playing it at that time. So I think the fans have done a decent job based on, what they were getting out of the team. So hopefully now can keep riding it. If they go 2-0 this week, then like maybe I'll start to entertain a little bit, like, where they're at in the net and thinking about that a bit. But the problem is, as we said, like you hit one little rough patch here the rest of the year, drop a couple games in a row. I mean, then like it's going to be, you're pretty much done. Like you got to stay really, really hot the entire rest of the season. The margin for error is completely gone. That has been completely burned away.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But if you do go 2-0 and then you got Arizona at home, Arizona's playing one of the hottest teams in the country now, 9-1 in the Big 12, and they're top 15 in the net. So you do have opportunities really here to enhance your resume significantly. Again, Iowa State on the road was K-State's first quad one win. So you got to get a lot more and you got to stack a lot more, and you can probably only afford to lose a couple of games the rest of the way. So it's asking a lot, but at least it's fun, man. And I told John this on Patreon last night, like it's entertaining basketball again. I'm not counting down to the season ending anymore. I'm looking forward to games. I'm looking forward to Tuesday night against Arizona State. And so appreciate at least these guys laying it on the line and pulling it back together to the point where the basketball is fun. The atmospheres will be fun, and fans will want to go to games, hopefully. And I think I'm excited for these guys that haven't played in a packed Bramlage before, like Max Jones, Coleman Hawkins, Dug McDaniel, etc., to get to experience what a true Bramlage atmosphere is like on Saturday in Manhattan against Kansas and then Arizona on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I'm not ready to have a tournament conversation yet either, kind of with John. And I think the kind of losses that they have are pretty limiting.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's look, it's fair. I mean, DY is putting in plain terms there, but that's honestly fair. Whatever, it was fun for a Saturday, man. It was fun for a Saturday. So I can appreciate that. Keep it rolling. All right. Thanks to Nick Springer behind the scenes. Thanks to Holiday Distillery. Thanks to Alenko and of course Home Field Apparel. Go support all of our sponsors here on the show. You can get extra coverage from the game if you want another hour of Cole and I talking about everything, a little more big picture. You want a guest appearance from Brody, who gave his thoughts on the game. Patreon.com/3maw. You can sign up there and get access to all of that, plus be a part of the Discord. So, with that being said, for DY and Cole, I am John. Thanks for listening to another edition of 3maw. We will talk to you soon.